All right. The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. It is the first book in the First Law trilogy, and kind of mixed feelings on it, if I'm being completely honest. All right, and so just to start, the first portion of this review is going to be spoiler free, so if you haven't read the book, that's completely okay, and then I'll give a little warning before I start talking about any spoilers. But before I talk about anything, I gotta talk about this. Look at this. Is that not the most obnoxious, like, book cover, like, jacket that you have ever seen? Like, what is this? Look at him. What is that pose? Just like look like, I don't know. I found that hilarious. All right, and so I'm going to start with the good. So where this book shines is with the characters. There's a character in this book that is, if you read it, will probably be the worst person that you have ever found yourself rooting for. Like, he's just a horrible person, and you do find yourself rooting for him. He is probably my favorite character in the book, and he's just a terrible guy. But he's so interesting that you just feel compelled to learn more about him, and like maybe not root for him. Maybe rooting for him is the wrong word, but definitely just learning more about him. And so that was really cool, and just it kind of is part of the reason I didn't like the book. Also, is that the story is so character driven that it's almost like there isn't really like a plot. There isn't like a traditional plot where you feel like you have you have your like exposition, you have your rising action, you have your climax and falling action, and then the end. This doesn't really have that. It's just multiple characters, and there really is no clear main character. It's very evenly divided between all the people, and you just kind of get them, and they do things, and it's interesting. They're interesting things, but there's not like every time, like, I tried, because people ask me, what this book was about, and like I just kind of found myself like describing the characters, because that is what the book is about. This book is about the characters. There isn't really a very defined story, which it's fine, but I personally just at least in the beginning, it just felt like a lot of exposition, and like before I really like got to know the characters, I was like a little, not bored, but just I wasn't super invested yet. So like the first like third of the book, I just wasn't really feeling that much at all. But then I do feel like once you get to know the characters, it does pick up a little bit. But that would definitely be a con for the book, is that there isn't a very well-defined story. I feel like what we have with this book is like a perfect example of something that was inspired kind of by like the Game of Thrones series, where you have this very gritty, real, tough world that has a lot of moral grayness and a lot of like kind of dynamic characters. And so I feel like this book was heavily inspired by the Game of Thrones series, and that is good. Like I mean I love the series, and it's cool to see like things that are coming out of that. But I do feel like if you're not super familiar with a lot of common fantasy kind of tropes, you might not enjoy this book a lot, because a big part of it is kind of subverting those tropes and those expectations. But if you're not familiar with those like expectations, then you might not enjoy this book quite as much, in my opinion. But that's about all I have to say kind of in terms of spoiler free. I definitely plan on reading the second and third book in the series, and don't get me wrong, it's not like the book was bad. I did enjoy it. I just wasn't overwhelmed by it. I had heard so much about like the First Law series and this book, and just that it was really good. So I was a little let down. I was expecting a little more, but it definitely delivered in terms of character. And I would recommend it for people that are looking for kind of a very kind of gritty, realistic kind of world with like a lot of gruesomeness to it. I don't know what I would say. Maybe gruesomeness is the wrong word, but it's a tough world. It is a tough world. All right, and now to get into the spoiler section. So if you haven't read the book, don't go any further. So Glokta was far and away the best character in this book. Like, it was so cool. I never thought that I would find myself so interested in a torturer. Like, that's what he does, is he tortures people. And I didn't despise him. Like, Joe Abercrombie, like, makes him in this way where you actually kind of sympathize with him, like, and you feel bad for him. Like, he's in like this constant pain, and he's just like, you do feel bad for him, even though like his first chapter, he is torturing somebody, and it's just horrible. And I hate torture. But I liked Glokta. Glokta was awesome. Glokta was a really cool character, and I loved that about this. I found some of the early chapters with Logan a little dull, just because I felt like a lot of wandering through the woods, and he meets the Magi, and it's just I just found them a little dull. But then once everybody kind of comes together in the city and we start getting people to interact with each other, that is where this book shines. Like when you get those interactions, like the scene where Jezel is fighting that one guy, and then Baez is like manipulating it with the magic, and then Glokta is like curious about what's going on. He's like, this can't be possible. Like that scene was so cool. Any scene where you have like two point of view characters talking to each other, those scenes were really well done. Like when the people come together, I really, really like that in this book. Also, a scene that I felt like really shined was the scene with West and his sister Artie. Just because like the whole book, it seems like West is like one of kind of the only good characters, like good-ish characters in the whole book. And then he beats his sister. And like, it's like, oh, he's actually he's a horrible person. He's like beats his sister, who he knows had been abused by their father, and like it was like a sad, upsetting scene, but it was good. It was well written, and I felt like did a really good job of like playing off of how those kind of roles can happen in family, where people grow up in an abusive home and they kind of learn from that when that's all they know. So I did definitely enjoy that, because I remember reading it, and I was like, oh, like West is kind of the only person that isn't like morally like repugnant, and then he actually is also a bad guy. So nobody's good. Well, maybe Jezel's he's just kind of cocky. He's just a little. That's all he is. He's a little annoying, but he's nice to Artie. But then you get that scene where Glokta is like comforting West, and that was so cool. That was so like you see this like compassionate side of Glokta, and this humanity kind of slipping out of him, which was really nice, and I really enjoyed that. It made me like Glokta even more. Overall, I would have to say I did enjoy this book. It just didn't completely live up to my expectations, but that's not the book's fault. If I had just gone into it blind, I would have thought it was awesome. I had just heard a lot of good things about it, just online and such. So I thought it was going to be really good, and it was okay. It was good. It was a good book. But if you disagree with anything that I said in this video, maybe it's your favorite book and I completely missed out on a little bit of it, please let me know in the comments. And yeah, have a great day.